Welcome back, everyone, to the Property Journey Podcast, episode 35.
Afternoon, Chris.
Lovely day out there, Roy. Rain staying away at the minute, anyway. But we're going to be talking about succession and estate planning when it comes to property as a whole. So whether you're a property investor, whether you own your own property, and that's your family home, things like that there, even potentially bringing in farmland, sites, whatever it happens to be, anything property related. We're going to be talking about succession and estate planning then. So I have a few questions that obviously I would like answers to.
Shoot away.
If you have got the answers for me. But in a generalised kind of overview, why is estate planning particularly important when it comes to property?
Well, normally property, you have an asset, and it's very obvious. You have a fixed asset. They're generally worth a lot of money, and we hear this all the time. A lot of people don't make a will because they think, oh, you don't make a will until you're later on in life, and they're maybe only in their early 20s, maybe in their early 30s, and they're like, no, don't worry about that now. But everybody, if you have assets, whether that is money in the bank, or you own your own home, or you've got investment properties or land on a farm, you should and must have a will. Simple as that.
And is that when it kind of comes down to things like, for example, you take out things like insurance, for example, and if something does happen to you, then obviously there's insurance payouts and things like that there. Who does it go to? Who's your next of kin? Is that kind of then where all that planning has to go into place?
It's slightly separate, but all comes in together. So yes, if you've got life insurance, then that means if you pass away, an insurance company pays out a lump sum. But again, that has to be set up as to, does that fall in to the rest of your estate? So your estate is basically all your assets, or is it kept separate? So have you named somebody else and it goes straight to them? But having a will makes it completely clear as to who's getting what. A lot of people think, oh, well, sure, I don't need a will. It'll be my next of kin. Not always the case. If you don't have a will, effectively there's a set of rules by the law, by the government, whoever way you want to look at it, who dictates who's getting what, and that quite often and quite commonly is not what most people want. So yes, if you have a will in place, it's very simple. This is how my property, my financial affairs are going to be passed over.
Because I suppose the big one, and in current day and age, a lot of people are living with partners. They're not formally married. But that's one of the big ones where if you don't have a will naming, your partner as such, surely they're not entitled to, if someone dies without a will.
Well, go again.
So obviously outright, within the rules of, passing things down, if you've got a partner but you're not formally married to them, is it not within the rules then that it doesn't fall directly to them?
Exactly. In that scenario, there's a possibility, in fact, that they could miss out on everything. And that would mean maybe you've bought a house together, or you've got assets and each of you own assets, but you're not married, but those assets aren't in joint names. Well then, yes, that would mean if you pass away, then your partner, your loved one, most likely will not benefit from it. Whereas if you have that will, that clearly states who's getting what.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to then touch on then, kind of, is what happens if you don't have it. There's obviously benefits for having a will. If you don't have one, kind of, then does it boil down to that set of rules then?
Yes. So if you don't have one, there's a set of rules set out by the government or by the law, which then simply states, right, well, this is how your assets are distributed out, and that doesn't always suit everybody.
And that's obviously going down probably the lines of, if you've got children, it's passed down to them. If you've got parents, things like that.
So the bigger, no matter what, it creates a problem. But that problem mushrooms bigger and bigger, as in the more assets that you have and the bigger your family. That if you don't have a will, then you're just creating that big problem.
What is your thoughts on trusts when it comes to property? And obviously then when it comes down into estate planning, things like that, there's, in this day and age with social media, there seems to be this whole focus on trusts, and you need to be doing, setting up trusts, and you need to be putting assets in the trusts, and it's trust. What's your thoughts on?
I'm fed up listening to it, because I would say easily I would get 5 to 10 inquiries every week. Oh, I want to put my property into trust. So you don't get into the conversation on the phone. You get them booked in for an appointment and you talk through it with them. And I now ask, well, what do you know about a trust and why? Oh, I've seen it on the internet or what have you. Most of those comments are coming from an English-based platform, and it doesn't always suit for here. And there was actually a court case there back in the summertime, or maybe the start of the summertime, where a council or a nursing home in England set aside a trust. So what that meant was there was a trust there, and the court case said no. Basically, they squashed it and tramped on the trust, and it became non-existent. So that immediately means that anybody who's put assets into a trust to try and avoid maybe tax or nursing home fees or anything like that, then that's completely pointless. And a lot of companies are mad keen to set you up on a trust because there's significant costs involved with setting it up and running it. So for the typical person, the vast majority of people, you don't need a trust. And I can remember having a conversation with a company one time to say, well, you're recommending a trust here. The person owns a house. The house is worth £60,000. It's going to cost £5,000-6,000 to create that trust. There's all the alternatives. And his answer was, oh, that's the client's castle and they want to protect their castle. And I felt like saying, well, yes, there's merit in that, but that's a sales pitch to the person. Whereas you could create another method for maybe £1,000, maybe less than that, or maybe there's a few other options where you don't actually need to do anything and it's completely protected. So long story short, trusts are only suited to very, very specific people, and you're normally talking the top 5% people.
Because that's why I wanted to bring it up, because you do see a lot of promotion around it now, especially when it comes to, and I'm even going as far as clicking into the websites and of people within the legal profession and things like that there. And the first thing you see once you click into estate planning is nearly trusts.
Yeah.
Is one of the, and it seems to be this thing where a lot of people now think that they need one.
Yeah. I'm
guessing then it's clearly based on your situation and probably what your assets are.
Exactly. Yeah.
What obviously then, when it comes to, estate planning with property, things like that there is obviously then going to be tax complications. Maybe not so much complications, but, obligations, considerations, whatever way you want to put it. What kind of then, or where would tax come into it then?
I can't specifically say about tax, but yes, you should always be cautious of it. And I say it all the time, you always have a good team around you, one being an accountant, one being a solicitor, who they're working in partnership with each other. So if you go to transfer property, then you should be just double checking with an accountant to make sure that are there any tax implications. The bigger the assets, the more valuable everything that you have, well then yes, the more important it is, or the higher importance it is to have an accountant on board. But for the vast majority of people in a typical scenario, there's generally not a tax implication for gifting and transferring, but always check with your accountant.
Yeah. Because that's what I was going to say. Is it if I was discussing, say for example, that's maybe someone that owns their family home and things like that. Is there again different considerations whenever it comes to someone with a property portfolio?
So property portfolio is completely different because you're into many properties worth maybe hundreds and hundreds of thousands. So yes, highly likely there's going to be tax implications. So before you would gift or transfer or do anything, you would always get an expert opinion to make sure what you're doing is correct, and is tax being reduced, and if there is going to be tax, how much is it going to be?
Yeah. One of our big topics that we like to discuss at the moment is enduring powers of attorney, and how important that they are for, again, very much similar in the same bracket as having a will.
Yeah.
How important an enduring power of attorney is. How important is it then when it comes to that kind of estate planning, succession, maybe not so much even in terms of property, but in a general basis?
Everybody should have not only a will, but an enduring power of attorney. So I'll go in to actually explain what they are, because what we find is a lot of people don't know what an enduring power of attorney is. So our company policy is, if anybody comes in to us to have a chat about a will, we make it mandatory that we must inform them and advise them and help them and give them information on an enduring power of attorney. So to explain the difference, a will is made and it's put in the safe, and it's locked away and it's not looked at until that person passes away. But if you can imagine, that's away down here and we're here today. There's a lot can happen between today and that day that you pass away. So common scenarios which we hear a lot about are a person takes a stroke, Alzheimer's, dementia, maybe have a bad fall. In those scenarios, they can be mentally and physically incapable. So that means they can't make any decisions and their assets could be frozen. Now, when I say assets, that could be somebody who has 10, 20, 30, 50 houses worth millions, right down to somebody who has one bank account with money in the bank. So it makes no difference. An enduring power of attorney is for everybody, no matter where you are on the scale of wealth. And having an enduring power of attorney then means that you've nominated somebody that in those circumstances you trust them and want them to do it. And that's what the enduring power of attorney is. If you don't have an enduring power of attorney, your loved ones then has to go to the court and apply for a controllership. That can cost thousands. It can take a lot of time. But our feedback is the stress that puts a family under is immense. And that can all completely be wiped out by simply having an enduring power of attorney in place.
And I suppose then, because as you're saying there, the stress of it, a lot of the time there needs to be nearly like a quick action. Something has maybe come up where it needs to be actioned. If you don't have that enduring power of attorney in place to be able to, carry out that action that maybe needs to be done, time frame wise, what are you probably chatting? Maybe 8 weeks, 12 weeks, maybe to try and get a controllership across the line? Would it be maybe not as much as that? But
to get a controllership, so if you don't have an enduring power of attorney, takes months upon months. But if the enduring power of attorney is in place and your loved one becomes mentally or physically poorly, then you're talking about a few weeks getting everything up and running. So you can see the big difference there between having one and not having one. So not having one is costly, stressful and time consuming, and having one is the complete opposite of all of those three.
And is it helpful then, for example, then obviously, because I know we're talking about estate planning, and estate planning, you would usually say a lot of what it is a tendency for afterwards, and maybe in terms of whenever you pass away, things like that. But if you're a landlord, for example, or maybe have a portfolio of houses, if you become mentally incapable, how do you manage them properties? Is that where maybe a power of attorney can kind of come in to help with that as well?
Oh, so having an enduring power of attorney is controlling all of your assets. So if the person's maybe that wee bit more mature and their health deteriorates massively, well then the more the assets that they have, the bigger the complication. But by having an enduring power of attorney, you are nominating somebody to basically take care of all of those affairs for you. So that means your houses, your rental income, everything can still be controlled and flow easily. Whereas by not having that, everything is completely frozen. So you just stop and imagine the chaos that can bring to a lot of people's lives by not having a conversation and by not planning ahead.
And probably, I suppose, I know we tend to stick to property on this, but I'm kind of divulging maybe even further afield in the effect that could have, for example, on businesses, the effect that it could have even on farms, things like that there. Is that kind of, where people may not think that their scenario doesn't suit having one.
Yeah.
These are all scenarios that really and truly, this is why you should have one.
So that's what anybody, no matter what asset you have, whether it's a bank account with money in it, to assets, businesses, property, it doesn't matter. Everybody, it's just the bigger the asset, the bigger the worth, the bigger the problem if you don't have one.
Yeah. What kind of then are the most common mistakes you would say? And I could probably rhyme a few off here just from even the conversation that we've just had. What are the common mistakes people would, make them when it comes to planning for succession?
The common mistake people make is not planning at all, by not making a decision. We hear it all the time, people saying, I haven't got round to it, or I must do that, I'll do that next week. And I would say the main reason is it's fear. So it's fear in that people are afraid of thinking of worst case scenario, and they think they're never going to become poorly or they're going to pass away. It's a fear of maybe deciding that they do have a difficult decision to make because they maybe have a number of children and they can't decide who's going to get what. So it's really down to the biggest mistake people make is not having a decision. Anybody that I'm talking to, I always say to them, listen, you're thinking about a will, let's not think about it. Come in and have a chat. And they're coming in for a chat, and I don't get them to make decisions, so to speak. I simply go through everything, go through their family, go through their history, their assets, everything, and we have a chat and we take it step by step. And probably within an hour and a half time, they haven't realised it, but we've created the will, created the enduring power of attorney without them actually realising.
Yeah. You are right in what you're saying. A lot of the decisions, whether it's assets, whether, how do you divide that out, or maybe it's even thinking about, who am I maybe going to choose as my power of attorney? 9 times out of 10, you probably know. You just don't want to commit to it.
Yeah.
Because I think we've discussed before, you might have a brother who really, well, he's maybe never in the country, for example, he lives abroad. What's the point of him trying to deal with assets over here if he's never even going to be able to do so? Wee things like that there. Other people just downright don't want to do it because they don't want the hassle. It's going to affect their life too much, so they would, prefer that they didn't have anything to do with that. Most people probably, I would say, know those things. And it's, as you say, probably saying them out loud and discussing it maybe then begins to reinforce that's what my decision's going to be.
For me, it's if a client mentions it or has a thought about it, it's I think it's my responsibility to make sure that they have to have that in place. Whereas others are maybe, well, if I'm not asked to do it, I'll not do it. It's no different to, for instance, going and getting your tyres checked at a tyre centre and them saying, well, here, there's a bald tyre. Well, they can give you the decision, change it or not, but that tyre fitter knows, well, listen, that could blow out, literally. Look at the state of it. My experience is that's going to blow out in the next 100 miles and somebody could be badly hurt or killed. Yeah. Similar sort of scenario. We see the aftermath of people not having wills and enduring powers of attorney, and we get to know our clients over the years. And the last thing that I want to now deal with is them passing away and a big row and a big battle to see their hard-earned money that they've spent all the years building, that I've actually watched them and helped them and advised them, being lost because I didn't persist to have that conversation to say, let's get this done, let's get something in place.
Yeah. And let's be honest, when we talk about estate planning, you simply are only creating a plan. We create a plan for everything else. If you're going on holidays, you'll create a plan for the week that you're going away and what you want to achieve and what you want to do and what you want to go and see, you know, and it's no different. No. You know, all you're doing is just discussing maybe what you own and who you want people to take responsibility.
Exactly.
Big one then is how can blended families, you know, so we're talking here, there could be stepchildren maybe involved, there could be second, third marriages maybe. How kind of can that complicate the planning side of things?
Doesn't necessarily complicate things if people talk about it and it's planned and it's put in place, but it certainly complicates things if there is no plan and no discussion and nothing put in place. So it comes back to the same, as we said at the start, the more assets and the more people involved, then yes, the bigger the problem. So if you could imagine the complication was just a typical mother, father, children, and they don't make a will, throw into the mix stepchildren and what have you, you're just increasing the possibilities of complications.
And I suppose that could even go as far as, you know, just no matter how big even a family is, for example, things like that there, you know, the more people that's in the mix, the higher the chance there's going to be a dispute and, you know, people are kicking off, well, why did he get that? You know, and if there was nothing in place, then there is going to be an argument over it.
Yeah.
Is there any differences then kind of whether you would be, say, for example, leaving one property, say the family home, for example, in comparison to then maybe leaving, say, 4 or 5 houses, or going further again, leaving more than 5 houses?
Well, in a typical scenario, there's different advices and different things have to be taken into account without getting into it in detail. But very simply, it's up to the person as to who they give what. Yes, there's obligations where they have to provide for certain people, but keeping the boring detailed jargon out of it, when you narrow it down, the person can leave whatever they want. So for instance, if they want to leave loads and loads of assets to one then and not the other, that's perfectly fine. That's something that I work through with clients to see, you know, has there been a family row? You know, is there something whereby maybe one's closer to them? You know, I always ask, a common question I always ask maybe for a more mature client is, if you're having difficulty, you know, sorting out your house insurance, your car insurance, which family member are you calling on and which one is getting you sorted out as quickly as possible? And that can kind of help build that thought process of, well, actually, I rely very heavily on this member of staff, as opposed to, like, maybe traditionally it used to be years and years ago, farmers would leave everything to their eldest son. But the eldest son maybe doesn't even farm, doesn't even live anywhere nearby, maybe doesn't even live in the country.
Shows no interest in it whatsoever.
And you know, so there has to be the practicalities chatted about as well as the legal process.
Because that's what I was going to say. Is it back down to kind of who shows an interest in maybe what is ongoing, or maybe, you know, a family member there, if you've maybe got 2 or 3 houses, maybe runs the rentals for you, you know, and the other has maybe no intentions of ever going down that route whatsoever. You know, is that kind of where you go, right, well, they showed the interest in it, therefore, you know, that might be my decision.
I can think of one client, and yes, there's a family and there's one family member, and it's the two of them. They're thick as thieves and have been since the child was since he was that height, and he knows the full ins and outs of the properties, has been helping out at the weekends, has been, you know, doing the maintenance, maybe doing viewings, doing inspections, and has done that all for years and years and years for no payment. So, you know, it would seem logical as to that maybe he should benefit more. But again, it comes down to, I'm being a typical solicitor here and saying it's personal and subject to your legal advice.
Yeah. That probably kind of brings quite a few of those subjects all together, Roy, but give me in a brief 60 seconds, say, an overview of kind of what people should be thinking about, considering what they maybe need to have in place, you know, in terms of estate planning.
Very simple, and to really, really break it down, you should have a will in place you should have an enduring power of attorney in place, no matter what age you are, if you've got assets. And as for future planning, don't put it off. Don't say I'll do that next year, or I'm not too sure. Get in touch with me, for instance, and I can have a no obligation chat with you and talk you through it. Because what I find with most people, if we haven't got a will created by the end of that consultation, 9 times out of 10 they walked in not having a clue, maybe having a big fear, but they've walked out. If they haven't made a will, they're very, very clear, and they're normally booked in for about a week or 2 weeks later, and at that time they are definite. In fact, another thing, just get a will made, because that's another thing I've found as well. If people aren't too certain, there just seems to be something that as soon as they make that will, then the penny drops with them. It's a very common way of people who maybe can't make a will. They don't know what to decide. They make a will, and literally in 2 weeks, 4 weeks time, they're on the phone. You know what? I now know what I want. And they're back in again, and they're walking out the second time, well made, weight off their shoulders, feeling relieved.
Yeah. We'll leave it there then, Roy. Episode 35. That is estate planning and succession planning, with a wee bit of property thrown in there as well, but mainly just geared towards people with any sort of assets out there. Could be your family home, could be, as we've discussed there, bank accounts, could be rental properties, could be a bit of everything, but everyone needs to have a think about it. I think that's one thing that we can certainly say.
Have a chat about it.
Everyone needs to think about it, and certainly have a wee think about their plan and maybe what they should be planning for. But thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, Roy.
Thank you.
Once again, and we'll be back shortly with the next episode.